You can't scare people into recovery, right? Or you can force compliance for a little while. Judges can tell you what to do, your probation officer, all that kind of stuff. You can force compliance for a little while, but not motivation. You can't. You just can't do it. I used to tell the judges, they'd like, when I worked at Huntington, at the Bowen Center down there, like the judge down there said one day, what can I do to make these people get it, Chris? And I go, nothing. Just admit that you're not God. I said, I don't know what their bottom line is. I don't know what anybody, my sponsor told me once, you pick your bottom line, Chris. You don't hit one, because as long as you're breathing, you got another bottom you can hit, right? It can get worse than where you're at. He says, don't ever tell me you hit a bottom. He says, tell me you chose your bottom. Now, this is as bad as you wanted it to get. He says, the nice thing about recovery these days is you don't have to become an extremely low bottom drunk and actually like lose your health, all the kind of, everything permanently there. Like the people that started AA like in 1935, they were low bottom drunks, man. Okay, yeah. So, you know, I don't know what that is. I told the judge, I said, you know, if I knew what that was, like what would make people hit their bottom, I'd buy you a house in Maui right next to mine, because I'd be freaking rich. Okay, I could just say, hey, you know, this, whatever, and, you know, make a person, you know, hit that bottom. So he was like, oh, that sucks. I said, your job, Your Honor, is just to say, this is, you can step over this line. This is as far as society says that you can go. These are the hammers I have to hit you with. Every time you come back in front of me, I got to hit you with a bigger hammer. That's all I can do. And I said, I don't know what that pain is. Some people will go to jail. Some people will go to prison because they do prison better than being on the outside. You know, I've known guys that like said, you know what? They violate on purpose just to go back in. They do. They violate on purpose just to go back in because they go, I can do that. There's two, you know what? He goes, like someone said, and I'd rather go to, this one guy told me once, he goes, I'd rather go to jail than prison. And I was like, what? He goes, yeah, you got to have a job in prison, Chris. And he goes, and they expect too much from you. And he says, you know, in jail, it's just 3 hots and a cot. There's a whole lot less expected of you. You don't have to do as much, you know? And I'm like, dude, like, I get worried about people like that, you know, like people that just give up. You know, I like people like when I was a therapist full time that would come in and say, you know, like that guy on ADP, who, you know, who yelled at me, like I said, hey, come on, let's sit down and see where you're at. And he goes, hey, shut up and sit down. He goes, you know what your job is? I was like, oh, I guess you're going to tell me. He goes, your job is to teach me how to drink and not get behind the wheel of that car. That's all I want from you. And I said, wow. I said, you know what? You just might get sober. And he was like, what? What the hell are you talking about? And I said, you know, the only people I know that get better are people that can come into AA meetings and talk about where they're at and not do this. How's everything? Fine. How you doing? Great. Okay. Now, it's not a good idea to go to your probation officer, right? Or some therapist, because like some therapists I work with, like didn't get it. They would say, like their clients would come in and go, I really miss drinking today. I'm just, I'm frustrated. It just sucks, you know, and I'm not dealing very well. And, you know, they were just, when I worked at Park Center, they were all about drug screens. How many drug screens have you given, Chris? I said, none. And they go, what? Why aren't you giving drug screens? I mean, they wanted you to, as your therapist there, like they wanted like 15 to 20 a month on your clients, right? Okay. And probation was like that too. Well, and I said, you can give it to them. I'm not here to catch people. Okay? That is not my job. My job is to equip people while they're here. And they need to have a safe place where they can come and talk about if they've had a relapse. It is not my job to like report that to you. If they come in and tell me they've had a relapse, all I say to the probation officer is, this person is addressing their recovery issues.
How long did you keep you there?
They're being honest, and 5 years, and then I got fired. Okay, a little too honest, right?
You got fired.
I did. I did. A little too honest.
You can't care to work in the criminal justice system.
Right.
You got to treat everybody as, you know, like a cookie cutter.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and also, you know, like if you're going to be a therapist, I said, you know what? Like I actually had a PO say this to me. He goes, he says, you know, you work for us, right? And I went, oh, we need a timeout. Okay. And I said, I work with you. I do not work for you. I work for the client. Okay. That is my job. I don't work for you. Okay. And I'm not here to sabotage people's recovery. And I said, relapse is part of recovery. Like, you don't have to drink or use just because you get into relapse mode. You never ever have to drink or use again. It is not a requirement. You know, my sponsor had 35 years being clean and sober when I met him, and I've been on probation for 8 years, and he said, you know, you don't have to be back on when you get off this time. And I was like, what? I said, everybody relapses. And he says, no, Chris. He goes, that's what you learned in treatment, whatever. And that's why he didn't call himself a substance abuse counselor. He said he was a recovery therapist. Because his job was to help people learn about recovery and equip them for recovery, right? That was so shocking to me that, like, I never had to drink or use again. You know? I mean, I had therapists actually say to me, I think you're pretty hopeless, Chris. You've been getting high since you were 10. You've been on probation for 8 years. You're probably one of those people they talk about in the big book that's going to die and not make it. I had therapists say that to me. I'm like, who the hell are you to tell me? Like, somebody talked about last week, you know, when they said at a meeting, you know, like, you know, only 5% of us are going to make it, you know, whatever. And I go, how the hell do they know? That pisses me off. That really pisses me off. And I go, you don't know God. You don't know my free will or anybody else's. Shut up. Because that plants a seed in people's minds, you know, that I was so shamed through the whole treatment process all the time. Because I would tell people, you know, I really miss drinking. They'd go, oh, drug screen. I go, I don't have $20 more to give you. I go, like, I'm not telling you I'm going to go use it. I'm just telling you that I miss it. And no, my sponsor was the first person that ever said, you know you can miss it, right? It's okay to miss it. Because you've invested in this relationship with alcohol and drugs. How long have you had a relationship with alcohol and drugs? I said, 15 years. He said, have you ever dated anybody that long? And I said, no, I'm only 24. Come on, you know? And so he said, yeah. How much time, money, energy, expectation did you invest in your relationship with alcohol and drugs?
I definitely miss drinking.
Yeah. And if you don't, like, I always get amazed, like, at meetings, you know, at meetings, do you know what crosstalk is? Like at 12-step meetings, do you know what crosstalk is?
Yes.
Okay, crosstalk is when people give advice to you, right? Okay, and they say you, and they don't, like, talk about what they're on. We're only supposed to share our experience, strength, and hope in 12-step meetings, right? Okay, I was in a meeting not too long ago, and this poor kid, he was like 19, right? And he was in one of the halfway houses, and he just sat there and he just said, they're going around the room, people are talking, and he just started crying when he started talking, and he said, I'm in this halfway house, I've never been there, everybody's so much older, I'm just overwhelmed, and all I want to do is drink and use, and I know I can't because if I get dropped again, oh, it's going to be awful and whatever. And I was like, wow. I mean, it took me almost 10 years to talk at a meeting like real like that. That was so real to me. I was so impressed. And all people said to him when we were going around the room was like, well, you know what, like, you know, they say that you got to get a sponsor now and start working those 12 steps and read the big book. And it was his third meeting, right? He doesn't know 12 steps and big book and get a 12 and 12 and, you know, all the slogans. And he's just overwhelmed, right? And so all these people and I just saw him zoning out. Because all they were doing was giving advice and doing this. And so, you know, I said, after about the fourth person, I just stuck up my eye. I said, hey, you know what? As an old timer here, we're supposed to just stop crosstalk. This is crosstalk. We're giving advice. We don't do that. We talk about our experience, strength, and hope. And I said, you know what? I am so impressed with you that you tell me that you miss it. You will probably make it in recovery if you keep doing that. That is so real. And I said, nobody told me for the first 8 years I was in recovery that it was okay to miss it till my sponsor. Maybe if they had told me that instead of dropping me or telling me that, you know, we just think you're hopeless or, you know, whatever, maybe I would have, you know, felt a little bit more hope about this or that I was normal, right? My sponsor normalized my grief. He normalized it. Because I would always say, like, one day he said to me, like, what's wrong with you? You seem really upset. And I said, I think I'm in self-pity. And he goes, why? And I said, because I'm saying, you know, why me? Why do I have to be an alcoholic? And like, why do I have to go through all this? And he goes, that's grief. That's not self-pity. Self-pity is poor me. He goes, grief is why me. Everybody, when they loses something, says, why me? He says, but are you coming to meetings? Are you drinking over it? Are you getting high? Are you sabotaging your probation? I go, no. And he goes, so you're just grieving. I mean, I had never In 8 years with therapists, probation officers, nobody had ever said that it was okay to miss it. And that would help my change process so much because it was just normal. You know, he said, if you had been married 15 years and your spouse just died today, would you stop thinking about it? Would you just stop? And I go, well, hell no. Right? He goes, have you broken up with anybody and then like just quit thinking about them? I said, no, everything makes you think about them, right? So when you first quit, everything makes you think about it, which is real normal. Okay, so if you look at these stages like we've gone through before here, okay, there are different stages of change. Some people come into treatment in what they call the first stage of change is what they call pre-contemplation, and that's where you're pretty much in denial. You don't really think that the problem applies to you. You might have had just one or two negative consequences at this point or something, or you're just like your denial is so strong that you just don't even know that there's a real problem there until you actually face a negative consequence, right? When you face a negative consequence, that's when you move into contemplation, okay? And that's when you get increased awareness about like, oh my God, you know what? This actually might be a problem. There might be something I have to do about this at this point. And you start getting more awareness about what the problem actually is at that point. And that's when you start naming it. It has caused me issues. How big of a problem is it and all that kind of stuff. So you start exploring that. It's the exploration of the problem, which is like contemplation, because you can't make a decision about anything until you've really like explored it, right? And so that's what like treatment and education should actually be, is like looking at like, there's a whole continuum of like from use to abuse to dependence. Where do I fall on that? What's probably going to be the best plan for me? You know, what do I need for myself right now? Because it's like different for every person when they come in, okay? So once you like just make a decision about what you're going to do, that's when you go into preparation and you start figuring out what's a recovery and a relapse prevention plan for me, okay? I've had people come in treatment that got one DUI and they're not alcoholics, really. I mean, they come in and probation told them they were, all these people did and everything else. And I do their assessment and I go, dude, you're not an alcoholic. You made a bad decision one day, and you know you've never had any other history. You don't whatever. You don't miss it. You're not like whatever. And I said, so your recovery plan is going to be different, right, than another person's recovery plan. So like I had that one guy that like he had 7 kids, he and his wife, all the same woman, and every Friday night they'd go out together, get a babysitter, and then just like that was their date night, right? Because we got to get time away from the kids. And he showed up late one night for it and didn't eat as much as he normally did, and they always like would split a pitcher between them. And so they drove out, and it was in when I worked in Decatur, and they sit right there on 24 waiting, right, the cops. And they pull up by all the restaurants and everything. They pull him over, and he blew a .08, okay, and never had a problem before, never would ever. And usually they stretch it out, like 1 drink an hour or whatever like that. And, you know, he had never had a problem before. So his plan was that when he went out, he got one of those breathalyzers off the internet, right? And that he blew it when he would go out after he got off probation. He didn't drink the whole time he was on probation. And he said, my plan, Chris, is I'm going to blow this. And if it's a .04, I'm not driving. Because, you know, your blood alcohol level can rise, right? That's why when they arrest you, they give you a blood alcohol level when they arrest you, and then like an hour later in jail. That ever happen to anybody? Yeah. Besides me? Okay. They give you an hour later because they'll charge you with that blood level. What's that?
That's the main one when you get down there.
Yeah. They'll charge you with that because your blood alcohol level is still rising, because they can give you stronger sanctions and get what? Like more money from you the higher your blood alcohol level. Okay, they can keep you on probation longer based on that.